All right. Welcome, everyone. Um, so this session, we're going to cover meta programs. Um, we really should have been doing these a lot more in the past, so I thought we would cover three of the five meta programs. And we'll kind of go into what each is and how it kind of applies to what you do as franchise consultants with your candidates. So those of you that use the tool, and most of you do that I see here today, will find the meta programs on the last page of the profile that you get on your prospective franchisees. Those that don't use the tool, you should, but either way, this session is going to be applicable. I always try to do that where you don't feel left out. So, what is a meta program? So, a meta program are mental filters that we use. Now, we're not usually conscious of them, but they're enormously influential filters that individuals use to process information, make sense out of that information, respond to that information, and from the world around them, and ultimately to make decisions. Think of it this way, that there's massive data coming in every single day. So these filters kind of protect us in a way where we filter based on what we are needing. So for example, if we decided we wanted a red Mercedes, and all of a sudden we're driving down the freeway of life, we begin to notice every single red Mercedes. But if you weren't thinking about it, you probably wouldn't have noticed it. So that's kind of what a meta program is. It's a way to take massive amounts of information, including through our due diligence process as prospective franchisees, and make sense of it and make decisions around it. When we have different meta programs, you as a consultant, your prospective franchisee, or anyone else for that matter, conflict can arise. It makes you feel like you're at odds or someone is being obstructive. But usually it's simply we are filtering information differently. If you are providing information differently than someone is able to filter, then they're not getting full impact of what you're sharing. They're unable to make wise decisions. They'll go into overwhelm, they'll get distracted, and sometimes simply not make a decision at all. So making these meta filters making you more aware of these meta filters should be super helpful to you. So you'll recognize these immediately, even without the assessment results, but we tell you on the assessment what the meta programs are. We're going to start with this one right here, the frame of reference filter or sort. And we always tell you kind of bullet points of what that means, but let's dig a little more deeply into what that means. So there's an internal and then there's an external mental filter. In other words, this is our level of motivation for using our own criteria, our gut feelings, our past history, knowledge that we have, versus that of others in the form of opinions or data to make our decisions. So an internal is deciding based on their internal knowledge or experience or gut feel. And the external is deciding based on data, information, feedback that is outside of them. So a question that you could ask to determine this is, how do you know when you've done a good job? Is it when you just finish a day and you feel content and satisfied? Or is it possibly when you get an email that says, thank you so much for helping me with that, or a card, or some kind of growth in a particular way? So internal versus external. So an analogy or metaphor that you might want to use is the internal sorter is the judge and jury of their own decision. Your job is basically to provide exhibits. The verdict will always come from inside. Again, either from their history, their experience, from a gut feel. You will not know what that is. But I can promise you an internal will decide no matter what you say, or no matter what data you provide, they are the judge and jury, and you could be throwing information out that they are rejecting. So an internal sorter, some of the advantages of working with an internal is that they are motivated to move through that due diligence process, even with little feedback from you or recognition or praise or anything of that nature. They can keep moving because they know they're doing the right thing. Even if you're not telling them you're on the right course. So that's the right answer. An internal sorter, some of the disadvantages is they may override vital information, whether that's the item 19, whether it's a poor validation from a franchisee. So they'll ignore it, they'll cancel it out, and they'll even disregard solid information that the franchise development person has provided, or a franchisee has provided, or you have provided, or documentation has provided. Oftentimes they will override it because they know better, that these facts really don't have anything to do with them. They know what is right and best for them. That includes wise advice from their attorneys, their CPAs, their father-in-laws. They will oftentimes ignore this. And some of you are already smiling, go, I know someone like that. My wife is like that. My husband's like that, whatever it is. But let's talk about the external. The external prospect is like someone who brings an invisible advisory board into every meeting. Every meeting, they have an advisory board in their head, or they're going to go somewhere else and discuss this with others. What they are doing is they're building a case file, why this business is better than this business. So they are literally like lawyers gathering evidence and building a file that says this is better than that. They won't sign until the evidence binder feels complete. So they're oftentimes asking for more data. So your job is to fill that binder. So literally think of it that they have an advisory board. You may not know who that advisory board is. They're building an evidence binder, and your job is to provide that evidence. So they'll make decisions based on concrete facts, evidence, or maybe just a feel-good factor so long as it comes from an external source. That could be a wife saying, I absolutely can see you doing this, honey, right? So it has to be something outside of them that gives them a fabulous feeling. So one of the disadvantages of working with an external, they will get stressed when there's a lack of external feedback. They need frequent feedback from you and or their advisory board, right? This will allow them to feel comfortable going to the next step. So if you're not providing feedback, you've done a great job talking to those franchisees. What have you learned? What are you concerned about? Letting them know what the next step is and how well they are doing in that process is vital. Because if they're not getting it from you, they're not getting it from the development person, they're going to get it from their advisory board. And that information, you may not always know what's being said. So they'll oftentimes be indecisive until they've talked to their advisory board. Again, this imaginary advisory board that they have, and or they're getting feedback from you and the development team. So the way to kind of look at the internal is that it's basically a cycle in their own head, filtering through experience, time, observations, gut feel, all of that. These are very confident people, these internal sorters. So you want to play to that confidence. You want to validate that confidence with everything from only you will know what is right for you. I'm trusting that you're going to let me know what's right and what's wrong, because there's no one that's going to know better than you, Mr. Jones. So you are validating that confidence. You are using it to help them get across the finish line. So how do you close internal deals? First off, respect their autonomy. You're not going to shove data down their throat. Um, and know that the decision is going to be an internal one. Now, there's going to be times you're going to have to steer them to look at data, right? To not completely ignore things. But even with that, you're going to respect that you can't sell them. They need their autonomy. They're going to make the choices, but you're going to share with them vital things anyway, but reminding them, here's what I'm seeing, here's what the data is seeing. I'm sure when you look at it, you're going to see things that I don't see. I happen to use that line frequently. You're going to notice things that I don't notice. Now, that sounds funny because you know the systems, you know the franchise business, but it allows them to say, okay, I'm still making the decision. You're not selling me. The external is gathering information from outside. And so to help them, you want to figure out who those outside influences are. Is it an investor? Is it a lawyer? Is it a CPA? Is it the wife? Is it the father-in-law? Find out who those advisors are. Maybe it's someone they're listening to on the internet. Find out who that is and regularly check in. If you can include that person in your process of consulting with them, even better. If you can't, you're going to regularly check in and say, what does your CPA say about that? What feedback have you gotten from your attorney? How does your wife feel about this? You want to get that back so they don't take the deal, off the rails because they're not part of the process. So ways to close the external is help them build the case file, supply them data, validation calls. In fact, dig into how those validation calls were, where they're remembering it and they're articulating it. Reference third-party proof. That could be data, statistics, testimonials. If you're comfortable, you're also going to talk about item 19 or other things. So you're building a case for them, filling that binder up so they can ultimately make a verdict that says, this is the right business for us. All right, so I want to remind you, the goal here is you may be an external and your candidate could be an internal. You have to adapt to their frame of reference, their filter. So it's going to be mentally a bit of a wrestling match, I guess. But please, they can't absorb information if you're using your filter and it's counter their filter. They're going to get confused, and that's not helpful. Anyone in the text chat have a story where maybe somebody was using an internal filter, and no matter what you said, they did a yeah, but kind of thing? Please share that in the text chat, and we'll come back to it here in a little bit. So internal frame of reference, these are some sentences that you can use. I can't convince you of anything. Only you will know for sure. When you picture yourself running each of these concepts that I shared with you, which one feels most like you? Does that align with what you want? They haven't articulated what they want, but you want to get that inside of them going, do, 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 do. Yeah, that aligns, right? So you can ask these kinds of questions, but you're not going to go into convincing. Here's some tips as it relates to working with the external. So based on what your CPA or father-in-law or whomever said, and what you've learned from the 3 franchisees, which of these concepts has the strongest external support? Here's another one. Here's what other franchisees are reporting. Here's what the industry data shows. Your CPA, spouse, father-in-law might appreciate this report or this information. So you're keeping things on the outside and you're including that external reference that they have. Okay, that was a lot of yada yada. Let's move on to number 2. Normally this takes me 45 minutes for one, so boom, 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 we're going to get through these. the relationship sort. Now, the word relationship sort didn't fit on the page, so we just knocked it down to the word relate. And so you'll see it right here. So think of it this way. When you're looking at these chairs, when you see them, what do you see? Do you see three chairs that look very similar, or do you see how they are different? This is how we process information every day. We take in information. Is this like the other car I had? Is this man the same as my last boyfriend? We're always comparing something, and sometimes we see it as the same, and sometimes we see them as different. And we will have a preferred method of filtering. So the relationship filter that is a sameness individual is also called a match individual. So they are looking for what's alike. They are looking for what belongs. They're looking for what is shared. They're naturally looking for what matches, aligns, or stays consistent. They're like a magnet for patterns. They can quickly pick up patterns, and they are like quilters that can stitch together things. They can correlate this, and it relates to this, which relates to that, which relates to that didn't work. Or these pieces are coming together and it did work, and I want to move forward with it. So they're pattern seekers, and they're always looking for similarities, whether that's with you, whether it's their experience or transferable skills that they can use in this business. So one of the advantages to being a sameness sorter is they quickly find similar examples. We went to the same school, we were raised in the same country, we speak a language, we play an instrument. They quickly see the similarities, and they're always looking for agreement, initially with you, but then with the development people. If that development person isn't taking the time to pick up those similarities and the sameness pieces, rapport and relationship will be broken. So if you're dealing with a sameness person, you want to find things that you have in common or things that they have in their lives that are consistent with various businesses, because they're looking for consistency, they're looking for transferable experiences, so they are sameness oriented. For the sameness individual, change is hard. It's very, very stressful for them. So thus moving from safety of employment to business ownership will require a lot of finesse on your part as well as on the franchise development team. So we're not going to make them jump out of an airplane. We're going to show them how this is similar. We're going to show them how this compares in a positive way to other things. We're going to show them how it really is consistent with who they are. So when interacting with a sameness sorter, you want to highlight things like those transferable skills and experiences. It might require you digging a little bit, right? So let's say this business is one that is, a manufacturing business or a signage business or something of that nature. They've never had that experience, but they've had other experiences like project management or dealing with creative people or doing business to business type of things. So you're going to pull out of them the things that are similar to what this business does. It's going to make them feel safe. It's going to make them feel things are consistent. It's going to allow them to make a better decision. The other thing you're going to do is you're going to match and mirror. This is an NLP technique. So not only are you going to look for things you have in common, but you're going to speak at the same pace they're speaking. You're going to use similar tonalities. You're going to have similar posture if you're seeing them on Zoom. So you're going to find ways to match and mirror them. The more you can be like them, the easier it is for you to handhold them to that next step in your due diligence process. If you are energetic and vivacious and bodacious, and you're dealing with someone who's more reserved and a little more conservative and a little bit more thoughtful, then slow down, right? Slow down, become them during that time that you are with them. This will definitely get you more deals. Now let's talk about the difference sorter, or what is also called the mismatcher. So these are individuals that notice how things and situations are different. They're dissimilar. They automatically scan things for contrast, uniqueness, exceptions, and change. So you could be showing three similar businesses, and instantly they're going to recognize how this business is different than that and how this business is different than that. They're looking for it. They cannot make a decision until they find it. If they don't find it immediately, your job is to point it out, right? Your job is to show them, here's how this is unique. It's still home services, but this one has a patent, and this one has a piece of equipment that's unique, or this one works in a different marketplace. You're going to point out the differences, even if it's in a similar vertical. So think of these mismatchers or difference individuals like jewelers, right? And they're inspecting a diamond, and you wouldn't notice that tiny little facet that's different on that diamond, but they are going to find it, right? And until they find it, they can't make a decision. So usually they find it. If they get stuck, you're going to help them. So there's some advantages to being a difference-oriented individual. They tend to be creative. They're particularly good at anything that's evolving and revolutionary and trending and cutting edge. They make great entrepreneurs because they see the world in a different way. They're also good at critiquing people, including you, and they are devil's advocates. They will tell you what that franchisor is doing wrong, right? Uh, don't fix it for them. Let them find it. They cannot make a decision until they find the uniqueness, till they find the differences. And sometimes those differences are problems. And the natural tendency for us as advisors and consultants and brokers is to cover it over or to hide it or to justify it in some way. Do not do that with a difference-oriented individual. This a critic rather, in them needs to find a problem. What you will do instead is you will literally send them out to find a problem. This is a new concept for me. I think it's a good fit for you. Would you do me a favor when you talk to these franchisees? Will you come back and let me know what some of the challenges are? The minute they find the challenges, they will come up with a solution. And once they come up with a solution, they can decide. Sounds counterintuitive unless you're a difference-oriented person, like an engineer or a CPA. Boom, they can solve that problem. They can get those numbers in a line. The minute they can figure it out, the answer is yes. So don't protect the difference individual. Allow them to find the problems and the differences. So different individuals from a disadvantaged perspective, obviously they see the problems, right? And why this isn't going to work. And they're oftentimes into a yeah, but, situation. I have a dear friend who's a yeah, butter, and it's exhausting sometimes being around her, but I let her go on and on. So again, don't let that concern you. You are not to overcome the objection. You are to allow them to talk and come up with a solution. Or they can't find a solution, and then we eliminate that franchise concept. So these people may irritate you, especially if you're a sameness person. They might drive you nuts, but it's worth the time, and they will make good decisions. They also like a lot of change. They hate redundancy. Keep that in mind when you're picking out businesses for them, that they can't do the same thing again and again. Now, our sameness person doesn't mind redundancy. They love the consistency and the safety of it. Our difference-oriented person or a mismatcher, they're not, they get bored more easily. So you want to make sure that this is a business that has diverse problems and challenges and clients and marketing strategies. They're going to really thrive on that. So have them compare the pros and cons. Don't do it for them. Have them tell you what's the pro, what's the con, and have them find the problems. Once again, it does not matter what your frame of reference is. What matters is what theirs is. And yes, this might drive you nuts, but it'll make you more deals. I can promise you that if you understand your candidate at this level, it's really going to help you. So, in a nutshell, sameness people tend to really want continuity and consistency, while difference-oriented people like the novelty, the new pattern, the exceptions, the uniqueness. So some ways to kind of handle that is if you're dealing with a sameness, show them concepts that have had consistency and continue to gain market share and reputation. Use words like alike, same as, similar, identical, equally. These are words that will trigger those positive feelings for them. A difference-oriented person loves change and revolution. In fact, they will change every 1 to 2 years. So use words like better, more, faster, exciting. Use those kinds of words when you're working with them. So a sameness prospect needs to be reassured. So show them a proven model, repeatable systems, consistency in a franchisee feedback, and alignment with their past experiences. When you're dealing with a difference relationship filter, they're persuaded by a competitive differentiation, a unique value proposition, market contrast, and what sets that brand apart. So whose relationship filter matters? Okay, I keep repeating myself here. Theirs. You got to use theirs, not yours. And again, it's going to initially feel a little bit uncomfortable. Let's talk about the last one, and then we can open this up for discussions and questions. Hopefully, so far, this has been super helpful for you, and you can begin to see, oh, that might have been where I went off the rails with that client. They were a yeah butter, or I didn't take enough time to, show my similarities. Let's talk about the last one, which is a decision-making filter. So a question that could be asked to kind of help you know the decision-making filter, obviously in our assessment, we're asking several questions about it, is when you are shopping for something, do you look at many items or just a few before you make a decision? The story I frequently tell is of another dear friend of mine. When we would go to the mall, she was quite a shopper. And she was petite and she was cute and everything fit, right? And so she would try on clothes and she would put a stack over here that were absolute no's, and the other stack were yeses and maybes. And then she would take those clothes, give it to the store clerk and say, can you hold on to these for me while I run to another store? So it's on hold. We now go to another store. She tries on 100 different things. One stack is a no. The others are maybes and yeses. Once again, she takes it to the clerk. The clerk is asked to hold it while she goes to another store. She goes through that same process, tries on all these cute things. This is a no. This is a yes. And this is a maybe. Her thought is, if she still remembers what was in her maybe and yes pile from the first door, then she wants it. But if she doesn't remember it, then it's a no, right? So we're constantly going from store to store to store. Then she goes back to the ones she remembers. Now she puts them all in the trunk of her car. She never takes them out of the trunk of the car. It stays in the trunk of the car. And if she still remembers after a couple of weeks, what is in those bags, then that's a yes. She'll pull it out, right? Drove me nuts. I go in, I have a mission, I want one thing. I know exactly it either is or it is not it, right? So I'm very mission driven that way. So she is what we call an optional sorter, and I am what is called a procedural sorter. So an optional individual likes a lot of options. They're frequently glitter will come in and they'll be sidetracked. They're slow to decision. They don't mind breaking the rules. They're always asking, is there a better one? Think about that. That's the filter. Is there a better one? You could give them three perfect franchises, and they're still asking, what else do you have? Or they'll be off doing their own research because they're asking, is there a better one? End results is more important, and of course, that has to be the best. A procedural person, on the other hand, is driven nuts by too many choices. They go into a store and it's overwhelming, they'll walk out. Just give me one or two, maybe three options. That's all that I want. So they're quick to decision. They are process oriented, criteria oriented, and very procedural in how they do things. They're not asking, is there a better one? They're asking, of these three choices, which is the best one? So doing it right is most important to them. So another way visually to kind of think about the optional versus the procedural is they both go to a buffet. The optional goes to the buffet. They don't want one plate. They want several plates. And they want to see every station before they decide what they want. Where the procedural really would prefer that there's a fixed menu. There's three courses. This is the order they come in. Then they can just relax and everything is clear and ordered and perfect. So their choices might be chicken, beef, fish. That's it. That's their choices, and they'll make a decision. So think of it in those kinds of terms. So our optional, the advantages is they explore many options, and it provides people a lot of choice, and they're happy to break the rules, to think of a concept that may not be, status quo. So they'll be okay with looking at things that are new and not as proven. However, they're going to procrastinate, they're going to delay, they're going to stall. They avoid making decisions because their brain is still going, oh, come on, there's got to be a better one. There's got to be a better one. She's not showing me the best one yet, right? There's got to be something else. So they can get distracted with shiny objects, and you're constantly showing them more concepts, or they're talking to other franchisors behind your back, or they're doing research on their own. So the shiny object will get their attention, and the next minute it's not getting his attention. A procedural, on the other hand, is very efficient, good with rules, will stick to your agreed process. Here's my consulting process. We're going to go through these 6 steps. I'm going to walk you through it. Here's what I'm going to need for you. They love it. They love notes. They love checklists. They love process. If you don't have one and you don't communicate it clearly, the procedural won't trust you. So if you're an optional and you're a little more loosey-goosey and you're more of a free spirit, a procedural person will perceive that as, I can't trust you. I'm not safe with you. I could get, in hot water here. So they need process. And so you're going to clearly define it, and then they're going to follow it. A procedural disadvantage is becoming more, as the process itself may become more important than the job of buying a business is. And they can get hung up in bureaucracy, paperwork, more research, things of that nature. I'll give you a crazy example. I interviewed someone yesterday on my podcast, the Franchise Woman podcast. I've done this podcast for almost 6 years. And I had a young woman on, And she could not start the interview until she told me what her process was. I knew this was a procedural person, and I knew if I gave her a different process, she would feel uncomfortable. We spent 15 minutes her telling me how she was going to be interviewed. My show, she's telling me what to do, right? Procedural person, she had to have that process. And once I understood her process, we were able to move forward. So here's a trade secret. Especially if you're dealing with an optional person that is looking and checking things out, you need to help them do a compare contrast. I call it a scorecard. You can create it any way you want, but it's a scorecard. And you're going to ask, how will you know when you found the right business? And you're going to keep on asking that question, and they're going to give you a criteria. You're going to put it in a spreadsheet. You're going to have them put a score of 1 to 10, let's say, or 1 to 5. And I just gave you some example here. The number one criteria may be I can't spend more than $150,000. It needs to allow this kind of lifestyle. It needs to be scalable, and I need to do it in a short period of time. It needs to have a certain level of profitability. I need to have equity upon exiting. Whatever the criteria is, you are going to put it on a list for them, because those optionals, they will change their criteria if you don't lock them in to a criteria. So these are the questions you can ask. How will you know when you have found the right business? Please describe the most important things to you in choosing a business. Do this as early as you possibly can, so then you can literally do a side-by-side comparison. You can say, here's your criteria on the spreadsheet. Here's option 1 company, option 2 company, option 3 company. Now let's score them based on the criteria that they delineated for you. But you got to keep bringing them back to that scorecard. I'm hoping you guys are visualizing this. Usually I have an example. So let's wrap this up, and then let's go into any kind of questions, comments, stories that you have of your own. So know that sometimes, consciously or unconsciously, we are in a tug of war with our clients. And so the more we know about how their brain filters, comes to conclusions, makes decisions, and we abide by that process, and we create ways for them to filter in the easiest possible way, the more deals you're going to get done, the more safe they're going to feel, and you're going to shorten your sales cycle. So navigate their meta programs, just like I had to navigate this other woman's process for being interviewed, right? Even though I've done hundreds of, she's going to tell me how, okay, we'll use that process, not a problem. And she was comfortable. So I'm going to stop a share right now and open this to any kind of conversations, ideas, thoughts. Again, if you're a talker, talk. If you're text chatter, is that the word, text chatter? Texter, then feel free to do that. First off, was this helpful to better understand these meta programs?
Yes.
Okay. Could you, in this conversation, think of clients that go, oh, that's why this thing, or that's why she's driving me nuts, or he's going around and around in circles? Could you recognize this in some of your clients? Crystal, you're shaking your head. Yeah. Jenny, do you mind sharing the story of your guy with difference with exception? Because there is a meta program called Difference with Exception. We didn't cover it in this presentation, but Jenny had a client that said difference with exception. So what that means is they filter first by difference, what's unique, what's different, um, and are constantly contrasting that with one other company or one other situation. But they also have an exception, which means sometimes they're also looking for sameness. So you want to focus on that front end, which is differences, but occasionally throw in things that are the same. Um, is that where you were addressing, Jenny?
Yeah, he just from the very beginning, I'm still working with him, but from the very beginning, he has been let's just say difficult. Just in my initial meeting with him to go over his Zorakle results, talk about his profile form, narrow in on some areas of interest we think can align. I would ask him a question and he would say, "Well, why does that matter?" Just very and I'd have to explain, well, this is why I'm asking this question. And just really little bit of, well, why don't you just show me things within my budget? And, just that kind of, thing. And I mean, very high net worth individual, but, really in terms of how he deals with things, I would say that he would be more of an internal thinker, but he came back as an external frame
He's
of
an
reference.
external, yeah. The
Yeah.
way you describe him as an external, he was asking, which is what the external is, of course, asking. He's asking what makes this better. So, what would have helped him
Welcome
would
to
be
Zorakle profile.
Mm.
would have been to ask him what his criteria is, because then you can go back to the criteria. Because he's saying, what makes this unique? What makes this better? What makes this more competitive? What makes this something that I can leverage? Um, and so that's criteria, right? He's asking for criteria, but he hasn't communicated effectively what his criteria is. What makes this better? You could have thrown 10,000 things out, but if you didn't know his criteria, I want a competitive advantage. I want faster ramp up. I want something that um, I can do in 30 hours a week instead of 50 hours a week. What is better? We don't know what better is to him. He's not told us, right? He's
Mhm.
not told us what it is. So he's putting you on the spot to figure it out for him. So that's why the build the criteria. How will you know when you found the right business? And what does that look like? Well, it's got to be something that's long term, that's got more of a competitive advantage, that has brand recognition. He will begin to tell you, but he didn't tell you. He was putting you on the spot, forcing you to figure it out for him, to guess what it is. So, can I show you something since we're on this topic that could have helped if he was withholding? Because sometimes these difference-oriented people will keep things close to their chest. So it's not uncommon for them to do, Jenny, what he just did to you, and he's not going to tell you what that criteria is. So there's a way around it if they aren't open with you and they're holding it close to their chest. And that is to always go back to the values. So I'm actually borrowing one of Lisa's clients here. Always go back to these values. What does he mean by success? What does he mean by creativity? What does he mean by innovation? What does he mean by team? Going back to this, asking him for criteria here. Success, meaning I'm making more money, I have more freedom, I ramp up faster, I can sell this business, at a higher multiple. What does that mean? So you can actually sneak criteria by asking them more information about their values. It doesn't feel as challenging as asking them, how will you know when you found the right business? That could be challenging, especially if they're not conscious of it. The other thing to remember is on this last Meta Programs page, if you look at the toward and away from, motivated by, then look at his fears. His fear is always this last line. Safety comes from. For Libby, safety comes from feeling competent, avoiding embarrassment and failure. Almost always, guys, the criteria that they're looking for is ways to avoid these fears. So let's say the fear is feeling incompetent. Then you could show the differentiator between this company and this company of how fast people learn this methodology, or how easy it is to teach their employees. Or you can show competency in the leadership or in the intellectual property. So you can show competency subtly by helping them avoid this fear that they're likely not going to tell you. So that's another way to get to it if he's not forthcoming, which it sounds like he was not as forthcoming as we would have liked. Avoiding embarrassment, avoiding failure. These are things that they have fear. So think of criteria in these different businesses that will help them not feel incompetent and help them not be embarrassed and help them not fail. This can be done through stories. It could be done through data if he's an external sorter, which he was, and he's procedural. So if someone isn't forthcoming in creating that scorecard, the criteria for you, you can get it in other ways by looking at their values and asking them more about that, and by looking at their fears. I know that was a whole lot of yada yada, Jenny. Did that help answer a little bit of your question? And hopefully that helped everybody else also. Did we lose Jenny? Did that help, guys, when we kind of looked at that?
Yeah, that helps. Absolutely. Are you going to send out a link of this presentation after?
Yeah, I remembered to record it this time. So it'll be sent out. It'll also be in next month's newsletter. And for those of you that are on your dashboards, it will also be under support and training on your menu. So you always see the last month's training. So all the training is in there in case you want to listen to it again, because we really did do a data dump, didn't we? So you guys have been very patient with me. Any other comments, questions, thoughts that you have?
Are you going to tell us when that one particular episode is airing for your podcast with the guests?
Oh, no, I don't want to give away names.
No fun.
Um, but it was so funny because I can tell you we had different meta programs, because I sent a quick note to my uh, co-host, and I said, this woman's irritating me, until I remembered, oh, her meta program and my meta program. I was like, I was ready to kick her off the show, right? She was just getting on my nerves. And that's what's going to happen. If someone has a different meta program than you, they're going to get on your nerves. And
My
even,
sister is a yeah butter. It drives me up a wall.
yeah. So just know if something is inside, it's probably you're using a different meta program than they are. To me, this is a casual conversation that is, us having a cup of tea and discussing something. There wasn't any bullet points. There wasn't any right way. I was like loosey-goosey, and she was, nope, we're going to do it this way. All right, we're going to do it your way, girl. Henny, yes.
I have a question. Hi, Rebecca. A while back, a few years ago, you had a training guide. It was version 320, and I was trying to find an updated one on the dashboard, and you're shaking your head. It's no longer there.
I can send you the 321.
I got the 321. That
It's,
was what, 4 years ago, I think.
yeah, it hasn't been updated. We really need to. We've been spending so much time on the technology, but to your point, I should probably put that guide on the training and support, even though it is a few years old. I should probably add that to the dashboard.
Okay.
Uh, all right. Any other comments, questions, aha moments? How about aha moments? What was your aha moment? Put it in the text chat. This is what I learned. This was my aha moment or your key takeaway. Put that in the text chat. That'll help me in future training. Make sure that I'm addressing things that wasn't an aha for you. All right. Okay. Perfect. We had a few people come in late. Those that came in late, hi Tamika. Those of you that came in late, we did record. You'll be able to find the recording on your dashboard, and you'll also receive it a day or two down the road and in the newsletter next month. All right. Beautiful. We'll see you in our next section, next session. Oh my gosh. Have a fabulous rest of the day.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Take care, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to quickly throw that out there. That was like a coaching question that I
Yeah.
learned. That was really good.
Thanks, Tamika.
You're
Seems like
welcome.
I get your
Mhm.
newsletters and updates and things of that nature, but I haven't seen your beautiful face in seems like years.
Oh my gosh, you do? Hi, I'm sorry, I'm so tired.
Oh, good to see you. I hope life is treating you well.
It's been crazy, but I'm trying. It's been a long morning, but thank you.
Uh-huh. Good to see you, hon.
Take care. Have a good one. Bye,
All right.
everyone.
Take care, guys.